And now I'll introduce our keynote speaker. So Ms. Debra Hart, she is a legend right here with us, and we are honored to have her here. She has over 30 years of experience working with over 40 different state and national projects. She's been busy. She works hard and has been with students with disability, their families and professionals to support youth in becoming valued members of their community via participation in K through 12 education, inclusive higher education, and competitive integrated employment. More recently, Ms. Hart has focused on developing inclusive higher education options for students with intellectual disability nationwide with her work as the co-director of the Think College National Coordinating Center. Colleagues, please welcome Ms. Debra Hart, if you are available. Stop sharing. Okay, stop sharing. All right, we're making technical adjustments, so hold on just 1 minute. Iris. Iris,
Okay.
As co-host, I have you as co-host, Iris, I thought. Take a look at that.
Hello, my name's Debra. Okay, can people hear me?
Yes.
Thank
we
you.
can.
Janice, thank you for the introduction, and most of all for the invitation to be here today. Both Drew and Janice, I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be here to share this time with you all. It's been exciting to participate in some of these institutes and hear all the incredible work that's going on in Florida that you all are supporting, especially your project team. So it's great. And yes, Janice, hopefully the next time we will be in person and can do some hugs or something. Okay. My session today, this morning, is going to be, whoa, it's going to be very sensitive, so I won't put my fingers near it. Around what's highlights current status of what's happening in across higher education for students with intellectual disabilities. And in particular, these are the main points. I thought I'd start with some of the grounding elements in the Higher Ed Act that you all know. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But I wanted to give you a thumbnail sketch of the coordinating center, and more importantly, what's going on with the TPSIDs, the transition post-secondary programs for students with intellectual disability. The worst acronym in the world. It's so hard to say. Anyway, but I'm going to focus on academic, residential, and career development and employment, along with then focusing on what kind of credentials are being offered to students. The key thing will be around post-college outcomes, because this is really exciting news, I think, for the most part. And then I'm not going to go over the resources, but I've included some for you all. This is the piece of legislation that you're all familiar with, the Higher Education Opportunities Act. And there's, I've included the key elements. It created, for the very first time, opportunities for individuals with intellectual disabilities to go to college. This is the groundbreaking legislation. And, you know, I lose sight of it a lot. And when I put together a presentation and pull slides, I'm always reminded to remember that this happened in 2008. And boy, we've come a long way at 2021. So there's the comprehensive transition programs. And in Florida, you all have an additional comprehensive transition program requirements that you're participating in meeting those expectations. But on the federal level, the big deal about becoming a CTP is you get access to federal financial aid. And there's also funding for model demonstration, those TIPSIT programs, and a coordinating center. And it looks at, and I'm going to talk just a little bit, this is more of a preview of the next session I'm doing on the accreditation standards. And almost all the data I'll be presenting is from these model demonstration TIPSIT projects. Okay, a bit of a blurb on the National Coordinating Center. We've been the National Coordinating Center since 2010, a good 11 years now. And it's given us the opportunity to have continuity between each 5-year segment of funding. And we rely a lot on our website, and this is a picture of the current website and what the key offerings are. But it really gives us the opportunity to coordinate across the model demonstration TIPSIT projects, especially the data collection, and to provide training and technical assistance to the universe of institutes of higher ed, students and families, and transition professionals in the K-12 system who are interested in starting or enhancing a post-secondary education option for students with intellectual disabilities. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the key features that are on the website. I'm not going to go through those in the interest of time, but as you'll see from this slide here, or infographic, if you will, there's been over 80,000 folks who have come to the website. So it's quite robust. This is for year 2020. The technical assistance, our biggest area is the help desk we have. And in publishing here, we've highlighted some of the key activities, but what I'm so happy to say is we now have put out last month the program accreditation standards and the report to Congress. Okay, let me go through some of the key features and I've tried to include the dates of when the data was collected. The federal student aid awarded for 2019, and you can see Pell Grants, supplemental education. This is actually quite significant because all of these amounts of awards that have gone out, because for the first 5 years from 2010 to 2015, there was very little to report. What's hard is from the Office of Post-Secondary Ed, Federal Student Aid, it's hard to get information about this out of them. But it's starting to really show that work-study, federal student aid rather, is being utilized. Not as much as we'd like, but it is. And here are the sites, how many in each state, that you will see where students are eligible to the institutes of higher ed that are comprehensive transition programs that offer federal student aid. Okay, you may have thinking to yourself, well, okay, so there's 109, or maybe give or take a few, because these numbers actually fluctuate considerably by anywhere from 3 to 5 points, if you will. This is from 2020. You can see that at that point we were at 304. I just checked before this session, it's 309 right now. But again, a couple can drop, or a few, it might go up to 310, whatever. But notice when the Higher Ed Act was passed in 2008 and the considerable growth of programs that we've seen over that time. And you may be saying, well, where are those programs? And here's a real visual on where most of the post-secondary options are happening. And what you may note is that there's considerable more activity on the East Coast, not to mention Florida. And most of that's primarily because there's a lot of state activity, like Massachusetts has a line item, New York, Martha Mock, who was a TIPSIT for two, a model demonstration program. She had a consortium approach, which really helped grow many more programs in the state of New York. But when you start to move west and you see how few options there are available, it highlights the need, especially in my opinion, for the Office of Post-Secondary Education to begin looking at geographic criteria when they start awarding grants. And then you get to the West Coast. California has 17 post-secondary programs, which may seem like a lot, but look at the size of California. The Pacific Northwest, really Northern California, Washington State, Idaho, Oregon, really have very few opportunities. So there's need out there, considerable need. And to make that point, there's over 4,000, almost 5,000 institutes of higher ed in our country, and less than 6% of all of the colleges in the US open their doors to students with intellectual disabilities. So we have a lot of work to do. Okay, this is the cover of the accreditation report to Congress, which I have included in for download. I think that's in for the accreditation session, so you could go in there and download that. That has a list of all the standards, recommendation to Congress. This was a beast to put together, but we're so excited to have it finally out as of last month. So the accreditation work group, the work of this group is critical, and it has been a different group each year, each of the 5-year cycles that we've had funding for. Okay, and then last but not least, this is the model demonstration program, the transition post-secondary programs for students with intellectual disability. And you know what the purpose is because you're living that purpose. You're no different in many ways than these TIPSIT programs. And they represent about 1/3 of all the higher ed programs for students with intellectual disability. Okay, since 2010, since the beginning, there are now approximately 121 institutes of higher ed across 34 states that are have been awarded and participated in the TIPSIT model demonstration funding. Again, you see the preponderance more toward the east side of our country. And here's a breakout of the numbers that we call each 5-year period a cohort, and there's cohort 1, 2, and 3. In the first year, there were 27 rather. The second cohort, there were 25. And the third, this past year, there were 19 awards made. Now you may say, well, why are those numbers different? That's because the budgets, they have, each of those programs has up to 500,000 a year for 5 years. So their budgets have increased over time. So there's less awards. And you'll see also breakout by the states. Again, a decrease in the number of states participating. Some of that is due to the fact that some states have more than one TIPS funded, like California has 3 this year, this cohort. And you also see a decrease in the number, well, not a decrease. The year 1 was 58 programs, cohort 1, cohort 2 had 65. And that's primarily because there were a lot more consortium projects, meaning there was a lead campus that really disseminated a model for adoption to a number of different institutes of higher ed in a particular state. And there you see the number of students, last but not least. We don't know yet for cohort 3. And here's where those cohort 2 sites are. And you see the dots are the satellite sites. So the star is the blue star is the lead grantee, and then their consortium are the red dots. Okay, let's look at the specific data that we have across those key areas that I mentioned in the agenda. Academics. For the 2019 to 2020 school year, there were close to 1,000 students enrolled in almost 7,000 courses for an average of 7 courses per student per year. And you may be scratching your head going, well, how is that possible? Unfortunately, it plays out that way because a number of programs are still offering specialized classes only for students with intellectual disabilities. And some of them are short in nature. They may be something on like, financial literacy, and a less than a semester course, so that there's lots of different topic areas that students are participating in, but it's not an inclusive regular course that is offered to any student. Okay, and here's a little bit more on course access, and you can see over time in cohort 2, really looking at the increase in the number of inclusive courses versus the specialized courses. And it's exciting for us to report now that it's really at 62% of the students were in inclusive, authentic college classes and no longer in these specialized programs, curriculum. And here's an example of what the college catalog, inclusive courses that students are taking. I'm not going to go through each one of these, so take a breath of relief there. But intermediate algebra, math 101, race and social justice. I mean, these are regular courses that are offered to any students, and students work with an advisor in their person-centered planning goals to develop a course of study over however long the program is, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4, to actually start to take these classes and complete them. It's pretty exciting when you look at this. Okay, some lessons learned. If you don't take an inclusive approach from the beginning, it's really, really hard to undo more specialized segregated curriculum. an example that comes to mind is folks at Houston Community College, lovely people, had started back in the late 90s a program for students with intellectual disability, but it was a very large, it grew to be very large and very separate. And they struggled with trying to really make some significant changes so that it became very, very difficult for them. And it was interesting to get to know them and see how hard that change was because it was so well established within their Institute of Higher Ed, but not included. The second lesson learned was ensure students get access to advising and transcripts. We've done some studies and we're seeing that those are predictors of inclusion. So it's important that students have that access. And the third lesson learned is making sure there's clear expectations with faculty about student goals, what are mentors doing, and ensuring that there's a two-way line of communication. Okay, the next area is the residential options and supports. If I can get it to move forward, there we go. There were 41 TIPSIT programs that offered residential options. 27 offered housing and 14 did not. This is a particular area of concern for us and challenge for the whole field, if you will. There's a lot of resistance and fear around creating residential options that are inclusive. You know, I would venture to say people might be remembering their own experiences in college. I don't know, lots of people say, well, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I don't know what it is, except there's a big fear element to consider. The most common residential supports were a residential advisor or assistant. I'll never forget being in Oklahoma at an Institute of Higher Ed and meeting with their residential folks. And I was blown away because these people were so committed to working with any student. They didn't care what label or anything. They offered such robust opportunities and assistance. So if those folks exist where you, in your Institute of Higher Education, take good advantage of them in a positive way. The next available support was more intermittent or on-call staff. And the third type of common support was uncompensated or roommates or suite mates. That's more of a natural support, and I would recommend taking full advantage of those type of living situations. Lessons learned in residential area, as I already said, the collaboration with residential life folks is critical. And most that I've met are really, really open to this kind of collaboration. And for students, I think it's important to ensure choice and access to housing. It's very hard for students, especially who have a long distance to travel to get to campus. And a campus that has housing is top on their wish list. So, and I would encourage you to really look at making sure that opportunity exists. And the third lesson learned is really looking at designing the residential supports around student needs. And again, here's the collaboration theme, working with residential life personnel. Okay, career development and employment. Surprise, surprise, not really. There's been a tremendous impact of the COVID-19 activity or lack of activity. And as appropriate, I'll try to explain when it really made a significant impact. And I'm sure all of you have felt this in your different programs or in the work you're doing. Okay, a majority in the area of career development and exploration, a majority, about 85%, participated in at least one career development, career awareness, exploration activity. And if you look at the table, you can see the numbers and percentage of students who, these are the list of different activities that are considered career development and exploration. Just to name a few: create or revise a resume, a company tour, creating a LinkedIn profile. Those are some of the types of activities. And what I really want to share with you, what we found in another study we did, what didn't predict paid employment were these unpaid career development experiences. So I know almost every program does them. And I think what's important is to, I'm not saying these are bad activities for students to participate in. I think rather it's the amount, frequency, and duration that these activities are offered. And I do know a few programs where that was all students got while they were in the program. They did not actually get to participate in paid employment. So consider this data piece, if you will. Okay, 32% of the students were in any type of paid employment while they were enrolled. And I think it's important also to note, and I was surprised at this point of data, that 28% had more than one paid employment experience while they were in college. And over 400 paid employment positions were held by students. So the numbers are getting to be robust. That's the good news. I think as I recall, 56% of those who had paid employment had never had a paid job before as well. Okay, if you look at these graphs, this is a comparison between cohort 1, 2010 to 2015 grantees, and cohort 2, 2015 to 2020. The orange is the percent, the orange line is the percent of students with a paid job during their time in college. And the purple is the percentage of full-time undergraduate students who were employed. Now you can see that as we started out in cohort 1, students with intellectual disabilities finished those 5 years almost at about the same rate of employment, 39 to 41%. In cohort 2, they picked up really at a much greater pace. And you'll see it goes all the way, it peaked in 2018-19 at 53% and then dropped to 44% in 2019-2020. And what you're seeing is the beginning effect of COVID. Okay, let me just move. Sorry about that. What you see here is a comparison by month, if you will, looking at the number of students employed by month as the impact of COVID starts to hit. And you can see a significant, whoa. I'm not sure why it just did that. You can see a significant decrease in the amount of employment as a result of COVID. And the employment at exit is really looking at exit on the day of and 90 days post-exit. And we saw really a decrease in the number of individuals with paid employment, and then a lot more around career development and experience, and very few pursuing further post-secondary education. And again, here is looking at some of the COVID impact. 2018 to 19, you see 52% employment, and then it drops to 21% in the 2019-2020. And this further illustrates the drop. The blue line is the percentage of students in paid employment within 90 days of exit from the post-secondary program. And the green line is the percentage of adults served by state agencies for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who had a paid job. And you can see as it goes along in cohort 1, it stops at about 40%. Cohort 2 picks up all the way to 52% and then drops to about 21%. So you see, and that's directly related to COVID. So the green line is the DD agency population of students supported in paid employment. And it runs anywhere from the first cohort, which is 14%, all the way to 19%. And that's from the National Core Indicators data. So we were doing so well. And then it really dropped. Okay, lessons learned. And the impact of the COVID coronavirus on student employment rate was so significant. It's not surprising. It was significant for the general population, but these individuals who were in college and happened to have a label of intellectual disability were no different. It's important to have an emphasis on unpaid and paid work while there's a typo there, while in college. And I think there's a significant need to really identify what preparation activities lead to employment. Like we saw transcripts and being in inclusive programs were significant. We need as a field to identify more what those activities are that are statistically significant so that we're implementing more evidence-based practice. Okay, credentials. What's going on in that area? And there's been a lot of activity. I can tell you when I first started this, very few programs offered a credential at all. If they did, it was made up on someone's laptop. It had no true meaning. It really wasn't necessary. It just meant students went to a particular program and that was it. We're all the way now to all 58 of the Institutes of Higher Ed programs offer a credential. The majority of them were created at a TIPSIT, were created and were a TIPSIT specific credential. And there were 2 programs where students could earn an existing credential that was open to all students. Let me say on the 56 programs that had a TIPSIT specific credential, the majority of those were approved through the typical infrastructure that one has to go through to get a program approved by the Institute of Higher Ed. They were not just, created on someone's laptop. So we've come a significant distance from when this field started. And I think it's important because sometimes, it's easy to get lost in the weeds or daily issues that one are facing. $270 students earned a total of 246 credentials. As I mentioned before, that were developed by their TIPSIT, but the majority were approved by the host Institute of Higher Ed. This is a big increase. And I think this is going to change. I'm really interested to see in Florida, you're ahead of the rest of the country by having so many career technical colleges that are participating, and we have a lot to learn from you. And I think that we might be seeing more micro-credentials, stackable credentials, those type of more creative options for students. But again, we've come a long way. And here's some of the examples. 33 or 57% offered a TIPSIT specific credential that was approved by the IHE. So over half of them. And 8 of the programs really focused on looking at existing labor market credentials. An example is Virginia Commonwealth University. Right from the beginning, they offered a 2-year program that was already on the books. It was really helping students learn some of the foundational skills and management skills that they could apply to a field like a student landed a job fully benefited at Amazon. So that is the direction I think we're moving more to. Lessons learned on credential. It takes a long time. So don't feel discouraged and let that discouragement impact your time allocation and the planning needed to put it in. I know just to get a regular course through our university took at least 3.5 years. so that that's kind of a definition, a part of higher ed is making something that's meaningful is time consuming. But what we've learned around the employment sphere in particular is that it matters that an institute, the host institute of higher education, approves the certificate. And the last lesson learned, well, there were actually more than three, but one of the main ones is the need to review how to align with industry recognized credentials, especially if you want to pursue support from vocational rehabilitation. That's kind of your pathway in. Okay, my favorite part. How am I doing for time? Okay, perfect. Outcomes. What you see here are for students who completed a model demonstration or higher ed program, TIPSID, who had a paid job after exit. And there's a story here. 1 year after exit, 59% had a paid job. 2 years, it starts going up to 66%. The end, I want to caution you because the end on these are low, but they're still, I'll take them. 3 years after exit, it was at 67%. This is pretty powerful. We may not see it directly, see the employment rates directly at exit. It's more the longitudinal follow-up. While it's very difficult to gather this data, it really, really, really is well worth it, because it shows that in time, going to college really has an impact on the employment rate of students with intellectual disability. Now, again, I want to caution you, this isn't a randomized controlled treatment design that we did or anything like that. This is just descriptive data. Was the student employed? And I want to say students are working at a minimum part-time, earning minimum wage or higher in many instances. So good story here. And it's not just about employment. 92% of the respondents, again, a low end, but still showing great promise, indicated that they were very satisfied or satisfied with their social life. And if you look at the national core indicator data, that figure's only at about 41%. So again, students who have a college experience are really much more satisfied and connected with their communities. I think it's really important. The other thing that on the national core indicators data across all the DD agencies, students report being very lonely. So I think this tells a whole different story going to college. Living arrangements, 1 year and 2 year after college. It's kind of the same story. We're seeing an increase in students who weren't living not living with their family. While they were in college, the majority live at home, unless there's residential opportunities on a college campus, and that's still a challenge for the field. And it went up from 53 in year 1 to 54 in year 2 in terms of the students not living with their family. Now, again, with TIPSID, with COVID, we may see a real change in that, but I'm hopeful that we won't. And here you're starting to see 26% of the 1 year respondents were actually pursuing further education. I think that's fabulous. While they may not have been employed, they're continuing their education. What we've learned most of all is having the high expectations that are paired with opportunities and resources, such as these higher education programs for students with intellectual disability really creates a pathway to employment and independence, as well as that personal growth students experience. I think it's critical to keep this in mind. And I'm going to say thank you and open this up for questions. Let me see, should I stop sharing?
Thanks, Deb.
Are there questions? Oh my goodness.
Well, there are no questions right now in the chat room. However, in your session, there are a few questions, and I know you'll want to take a look at that in Hoover and do some responses, but I will read them to you. You responded to one. And if you don't mind, I'll do those. Would that work? The questions.
That's beautiful, yes.
Can you talk more about the specialized versus inclusive course differences, data comparisons and benefits? Some college courses some college courses may not teach social skills, independent living, etc. So again, this is from Amanda Warren, and with our Tallahassee program is wanting to get some, for you to talk a little bit more about the specialized versus inclusive courses differences, the data comparison and benefits.
What we're seeing, thank you, Janice. What we're seeing is that students who are participating in a more authentic, inclusive course of study have better employment outcomes. And what we're seeing is people not necessarily taking advantage of the naturally occurring activities on a college campus in which you can teach the skill more individually. And where that's really where I'm starting to see a lot of peer mentors and other natural supports coming into play to helping students learn some of those critical skills.
Okay, another one is for paid employment during the program and then after. Does it make a difference of how the student is paid, work study, financial aid from employer or from program stipend? Does it make a difference when we look at those who are in employment after they finish the program? The type of pay, does it matter?
We don't have that data. But I can tell you the data from the larger field around K-12 transition and some of the data in the TIPSID world, if you have paid employment while you're in school, whether it's high school and then to college or college into the adult world, it makes a big difference. What we don't know is that exact question of does it matter who's paying you?
Yeah.
We don't, that's a dissertation for someone.
Good one. That's a good question.
Yes.
Those are the only two I see in Hoover right now in the session question and answer.
Okay.
Question, if I may, do you have any data, Deborah, on the relationship between size of program or size of campus and the effectiveness of the outcomes? We seem to find that in public schools, smaller schools are sometimes more effective, and I haven't studied it, so I could be wrong. But I feel almost a desire to make everything bigger, but I'm not sure if bigger is always better. And I'm curious if we have any data that suggests that being housed on a bigger campus or having a larger number of students in the program if that has any effect at all on effectiveness, academically, socially, occupationally, happiness wise.
No, we do not have that data. That's another area of need. This is, I forget because I've been doing this since the late 90s. This is relatively a new field.
Yeah.
And these are key areas and questions you're asking that are important questions. I can tell you anecdotally, the larger programs tend to be older and more substantially separate. The smaller number of students, that's 5 students to say 25, depending on the size of the campus, tend to be more inclusive. But that's just Deborah's view on the world. That I don't, but I don't know what that means in terms of the outcomes.
Let me ask a follow-up then. Are the data available and could they be compiled? In other words, do we have data on the size of each program that then reports the outcomes of the programs in a way that those data could be compiled into a spreadsheet or something that will allow us to assess effectiveness?
Yes,
Mhm.
we have a huge database that tracks individual student outcomes in courses that they're taking, whether they're inclusive or more specialized. And we have data on program characteristics. So
We'll be in touch with you, just, not immediately. First priority is we've got a bunch of students coming in August and we've got to do a good job for them. But down the road, we might want to take a look at some of those data and see, if we can reach out to you and see what kind of data you have and how we can use it.
That's great, Doug. Thank you. Good
No.
question. Because big isn't always better, but we don't have the data to show it.
And
Yeah.
that's certainly within our programs, we can certainly easily figure that out by our campus sizes and the numbers. We have that. That's not anything we're collecting, but we know what our campus sizes are for each one of our programs. So that would be one that we could do a comparison, Doug, with our current data.
I have a little bit of a bias too, and that is that it seems like when I was a kid, school, the purpose of education was to become a good adult, successful adult. And sometimes somehow over time, it's shifted to getting ready to go to work. And that is extended to this population. And my personal bias is good quality of life is we're going to prepare our students for work, but I want them to be happy. I don't want them to go to work miserable every day. And I think somehow we've lost sight of, as our world becomes more, and don't let me get on my soapbox, but as our world becomes more mechanized and automated and there's less need for human labor, we seem to focus more and more on preparing people for it, but we don't prepare them to find meaning in their lives in other areas. And I really think that's important. So I will mute myself. I can.
I appreciate your comments.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you got a lot of, yes, Doug, you're right, kind of comments following. So you're right on. And that's what's great about our programs, because they do focus on employment as the outcome, but in those inclusive contexts and across the campus being totally integrated, I think that makes a difference. The quality of life is truly seems to be the focus of all of our programs as they think about their students' mental state and engagement as they exit the programs. Let's see, we have one. How do you build those natural supports to be more authentic of an experience?
That's an excellent question. I think I would refer you to people who, if you want to be in touch with me, I will refer you to folks who are involved in doing exactly that. So you could have technical support from people who have done a super job in developing the peer supports that they're utilizing. It's really, I know a lot of them are using like, let's put it this way, many of the programs we've worked with have more than enough peer support's almost too many.
Mm,
And they recruit from their honor colleges across different disciplines. So it's not just one particular type of student. There have been students who have served as peer mentors where this changed their lives and they changed their major. So it's far ranging. I think what's important is that these individuals are well trained and that there's ongoing support in a weekly manner for these natural supports or peer mentors, if you will. And that the people I would put you in touch with can explain exactly how they have structured these programs. Kelly from Western Carolina is one example. Missy Jones from the University of Northern Kentucky, another super example. And there's lots of good examples in Florida.
there are. Yes, there are. Well, thank you, Debra.